today.
Absolutely. A woman who is an author and a speaker and blogger who has anxiety, who has struggled with anxiety, and then has walked through that and overcome much of what she's been through as well. So April Poynter, will you please come and join us in the kitchen?
Can you give her a hand, Ginny?
Absolutely. April, here's your hand. Thank you.
This doesn't happen every day.
That's for sure.
Thank you so much. You're
Thank
always
you for giving
just
it
so
back.
handy
She is.
and giving.
Yes.
It's not the shirt off your back. It's literally your hand.
The hand off her arm.
Exactly. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us and sharing some about your story.
Sure.
I'm excited.
Sure.
Now, your book just came out.
It did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Wait, this looks like you.
That is me. With one of the many
forward.
different hair colors and styles. We're constantly changing that. So this book it's so weird to see it here in person,
in our kitchen?
manifested here. And, I think that it's something that it took about 5 years to write it. Mm-hmm. Out of my own journey with anxiety and depression. And I was a believer. I was studying the Word. I was teaching women's Bible studies. And then I got this cold after I had gotten let go from a job where I was discriminated against. I'd never been discriminated against ever that I know of in my life. But I'm married to a black man. My children are biracial. At the time, my daughter was the only child that I had. And just very quickly, my boss saw a picture of her on my desk and asked, "She's very brown. Is your husband brown?" And I said, "Yeah." And there's details about it in the book, but there's all that to say the next day they terminated me. They eliminated my position. They said that...
So they did it politically correct.
Oh, yeah, and I was in HR, by the way.
Oh, my
Wow.
So they terminated my position. They said that my position was very close to the director of operations position. They didn't need both. And so all of that, through all of that, I had a cold at the same time, allergies, bronchitis.
Yeah. Oh.
And I went to the doctor, and I just had this conversation with my husband about, we constantly say that we are going to let God direct our steps and move us where we need to go, but we kind of hold on and we go, okay, you can move me from here to here to here, but I got to hold on to what's safe to me.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I just want to let go. And in that moment, I didn't realize that physical anxiety filled my body, the fear of, oh crap, I'm going to let go. And so I had a doctor's appointment. I'm like, got my appointment, talk to you later, hang up. I go into my appointment. Well, guess what? My blood pressure's high when I get in there.
Of course.
I'd never been told anything's wrong with me, ever. Mm-hmm. And so I'm used to, they do their normal vital checks, you move on, you've got a cold or you've got a virus or whatever.
So you weren't missing an arm like her?
No, I wasn't missing an arm. And so they, she said, the nurse said, your blood pressure's high. Immediately, it gives me this feeling that I'm like, what, something's wrong with me? And then she checks my other arm. She says, your blood pressure is really high. We need to keep an eye on that. She doesn't explain, you're not dying. You're okay. You're on cold medicine.
Right.
So that's kind of normal. Mm-hmm. So it's a virus. We move on.
You've just lost your job.
Exactly. You've got a lot of stress that's going on. So I get outside and I start blacking out. I'm starting to black out. Physical, the feeling of fear that I've never felt before in my life. And not to mention, a lot of this book talks about, it started out talking about fear and anxiety. Mm-hmm. And as I read through my manuscript, I'm like, this is all about identity. This is all about the fear that comes along with hiding who you are when you don't even know who you are.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I went from the world to the church and thought, well, I won't be this anymore. I'm going to be with their, the worship leaders and the women's ministry leaders, and I'm going to do all of those things. So I just basically turned in this bondage for this bondage in the church.
Doing over here for doing over here.
Performance and performance.
Right. So nobody talks about that, though. So you're like, I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. I didn't know about the whole in-process part of our lives, where Jesus met the woman at the well and the actual people that he goes to and says, my love is going to transform you. So the book actually played a huge role in fear. It started with the journey of physical anxiety, fear, panic attacks, things I never knew about. And, people around me would tell me, you're blue or you're down and that's normal. I'm like, no, I am crazy. I am seeing things. I am hearing things and I come from an addiction treatment background, and you hear those are very real manifestations that happen.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
But, I went to the doctor. I wanted them to tell me I was dying. There's nothing wrong with you. You're fine.
Right.
I'm like, I am not fine. I'm crazy. And so I just said, all right, Lord, well, I went to a place of suicidal ideations because the church, and I'm not trying to bash the church, but I write about this in here that really wasn't the safe place for me because I was told, maybe there's sin that you haven't confessed yet. Maybe you haven't done enough, been enough, gone enough. And so when I got to the end of that,
performance. You need more performance.
More performance,
More
yeah.
performance.
Keep the act up. And so I got to the end of that, and I remember laying on my face and just thinking about, because suicide made sense in my head, which gives you a new perspective of suicide. When I used to think that's so selfish, and whatever else. It's like it made sense. It was so twisted. You were talking about seduction and like the romancing that the enemy does when you start believing those lies.
Right.
That it made sense that it would set my family free if I just
it's a lie he uses
took my
with
life.
a lot of people.
Yeah. So I remember flipping my Bible open and saying, Lord, what do you want to say? And it went straight into the scriptures where everyone's falling away from Jesus because the walk is too hard.
Right.
And he says to his disciples, are you going to leave me too? And Peter says, to whom else? Where else can we go? Only you have the words of life.
Right.
And it was in that moment that I realized, this is where it gets real. This is where it doesn't feel good. Who are you when it doesn't feel good? And I don't feel like you're showing up.
Right.
Like, you're letting this happen. Why are you letting this happen to me, out of all people? I've performed. We're like this. Like, I'm your number one, right? What I didn't know is that just launched me. He had to take me into that place.
He gets rid of all kinds of self-righteousness in that journey.
Oh my gosh. So we write this book. I'm driving to work one day and I hear the Lord say, you're going to write a book about how you overcame this. And I was still in the middle of it. So I started to prophesy and speak and write blogs as if I were healed. So I started writing these blogs from my healed self. Interesting enough, you step into that eventually, and so
Start to speak it.
Yeah.
And you start
to
walk out in faith, and
so
you start to
awesome.
have this journey of your identity, essentially, and who you are in Him.
What he was trying to get me to. He had to get me. I've always been a happy person. And his thing was, well, who are you if you're not happy? I'm like, okay, gotcha. So I write this book for 5 years. I write it, I don't write it, I write it, I don't write it, which was all part of the journey. And you don't realize that at the time. I lose it, I find it, I lose it, I find it. And then finally, I just had this like spiritual come apart where I just felt like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this speaking, writing, teaching, because I feel so far off from you, Lord. You said that you give freedom to us.
Yeah.
What am I missing? This is not freedom. To which his response to me was, come to me. And so I stepped back from all platforms and things that I had built up for myself in the name of Jesus, of course. And I went into this quiet place with him and just read the Gospels and watched how Jesus met people in these really broken places. Go figure.
Yeah.
And that I was the person in the broken place, which was insane. So that was very humbling. So throughout that season, I finished this book. I sent it off to a publisher to face the fear of rejection. Send it, it's gone. There's no response, which from a publisher means it got rejected. So about a year later, and I move on from it. I'm like, okay, whatever, because that's what I do. Just one time, that's it. So I'm a friend or it's not really a friend, it's an old acquaintance reaches out to me and says, can we meet? I just want to talk to you about something. I said, sure. So we meet, and this girl, a believer, is pouring her heart out about, I am so afraid all the time, terrified. And see, the first version of this book, I realized that, like, I have all the answers because I've gone through it. The second version of this book was, I don't have your answer. I know who the answer is.
Right.
But it's your own personal journey.
Yeah.
I can listen to you.
Yeah.
And I can offer my own, journey to share with you, but my testimony. But so we meet, and I just felt this, I need to give her my manuscript. I'm not doing anything with it anyway. I'm just going to give her my manuscript. So I give her my manuscript. I gave it away. And then as I'm reading the first part of it, I'm like, this is really good, actually. This should have been picked up. So I write the publisher back, and I said, do you mind just giving me some feedback? Which is terrifying to a person who's performance-based.
Right.
And he responds and says, I've never gotten this before. And thus the journey began of writing this book. So we go through all of it. I'm like, my perspective has changed since I've written this book. And he says, I said, can I rewrite it? And he said, yeah, in 2 weeks. I rewrote what took me 5 years to write. And this is the book. And there's even a chapter in there that explains all that and says, this is the book you're supposed to read, because I'm not really in it anymore. My story's in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that it's all about that performance and identity, and that actually pushing through fear and anxiety to find my truest self, that it was on the other side of the thing that scared me most.
And letting it go. Giving it away.
Yeah, literally that whole I'm letting go.
Right.
I'm letting go, which started that,
surrender type thing, like surrendering to God, surrendering to somebody else, putting it on the altar. I always talk about it being open hands. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away.
Yeah.
Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Yeah.
And it's just having, if you have hands open, he can put a lot in it.
Yeah.
But he can also take things out of it,
Yes.
which is the part where you want
Absolutely.
to hold on to it. But instead, he went and put this in it.
Oh, yeah.
Where you now have something that has the ability to touch people in that place where they can see your testimony and also learn how to walk their own testimony out, which is so important.
And that it's messy. I think that was the thing for me. I'd never been around enough people that really carried the name of the Lord that were like, and I'm still a hot mess. This is what it looks like.
We had a TV show of this.
This book says, I'm a hot mess, but I love Jesus. I don't necessarily fit that platform, but I'm not in the world either. Where's my place?
Right.
So that's really what the book, it's kind of this in-between of the performance and the visual of what we put on people who are up on platforms. They're not, that's...
No.
We're
God put
all
them
on the
those
same
platforms,
level.
yeah.
Right.
But we get these ideas in our head that they are, I gotta be like that. Comparison.
Yes, because they got there somehow from performance. From their performance must have gotten them there.
Yeah,
Instead
their
of
good works.
God has borne fruit through them.
Absolutely.
And as an empty vessel, he can do that and use our hot mess.
Yeah.
Use
wants the
our
hotness.
use our pile of fertilizer, as we say.
Absolutely.
He wants it. He wants
Yeah.
it. That's where the growth is going to come.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
He can absolutely use it. Powerful to help us to, bloom all over the place.
And that's why you get to be our ex-victim.
Yes, our ex-victim of the week.
Yay.
So
Thank
speaking
you.
of blooming, we have blooming in the dark, blooming today, and with that, the tissues and chocolates that talk about the emotional hot mess that we are and the process it takes in doing that, and a fake tattoo version of the real tattoo that's the ex-victim saying that I don't have to stay in that place of victimization to Satan, to myself, to addictions, to whatever it is, but that I can bloom when Christ brings his life into that.
I love it.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
so we're celebrating you and what God's doing and bringing you out of that place of being a victim and into a place of healing.
And that journey that we all know, it takes an effort to finally surrender and let it go and be in that place of, okay, God, I'm just me and I'm just here.
And then we can use the fertilizer
Of our past to
bloom
today.
So that's what we say.
A free PDF copy of the Bloom in the Dark book and a full list of Bloom Today's coaching tools can be found on bloomtodaytv.com. Then visit Bloom Today's Facebook group for deeper conversation.